Good day to you. Welcome to this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. I'm Stu Ellis. I take care of the farm chores here at WCIA. Today we'll take you deep into a cornfield where ACE's researchers are talking to satellites. We'll also show you a driver's training class like you've never imagined. And join us with a visit to a big real estate transaction. All of that and more on Midwest Ag This Week, starting right now.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
Numerous state agencies and environmental organizations are working to reduce the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus leaving fields and entering streams. But a biennial report last week did not contain very good news, says Julie Hewitt of the Nutrient Research and Education Council, and she tells us why.
You know, when we look at from the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy, we really take a deep dive every 2 years and look at all of the data. And we're looking at it from, the adoption of practices, the awareness that's out in the countryside about all of the things that are required. We're working towards an interim goal of 2025. And we would want to see changes in water quality over that time, but we know that it's impacted by so many outside factors.
One of those was near record rainfall in 2019. But there's some good news.
But some of the big positives out of the report were an increase in the amount of cover crops that were used. From 2011 to 2019, we saw a 135% increase in the amount of cover crops that were being used in Illinois. We also saw a significant number of acres where the phosphorus levels were reduced, so the phosphorus application. So we know that farmers are getting the information, retailers are helping to implement it on the farm, but we're always dealing with Mother Nature and with the environment. And, we think if we didn't have some of those practices in place, the amount of losses could have been higher than they ended up being.
The negative biennial report does not mean there was a lack of effort.
Absolutely. So in the 2-year time period that was covered by this report, which was 2019-2020, we funded almost $7 million worth of research projects, over 59 different projects. So we take all of those projects, we're really getting at the core, the science of the practices. So whether it's cover crops, whether it's some of the 4R issues, and then our job is working with a lot of the other stakeholders. So with our member organizations like Farm Bureau, corn growers, soybeans, Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, and getting that data out so that farmers can make decisions and make changes on their own farms.
Well, there's going to be a collision between weed control and climatic condition changes, all when it comes to corn yields. Both of those factors have the potential to gang up on corn and beat down those yields.
This is Marty Williams. Marty is a research weed specialist with the University of Illinois and the USDA's Agriculture Research Service. I'll introduce our friend here. I think most of you can probably recognize a good water hemp that's taller than I am and almost as tall as Marty is. But this is what we want to talk about because in the future, this may be a real indicator of how weeds will be impacted by corn yields.
Did you know, Stu, we have a population of water hemp that's resistant to 6 different herbicide sites of action. That's almost science fiction, but it's real. And this case of herbicide resistance is not helping us out by any means. Those conditions that are already stressful to the crop, say particularly hot or dry in the summer, particularly right around silking, actually the types of weed control, or this diminishing weed control that we're currently experiencing, really exacerbates yield losses under these adverse weather conditions that are already a challenge for the crop. A lot of the forecasts of corn yields in the future and how climate change is going to impact corn yields, right now they all assume these fields are weed free, and that's a big assumption in my mind. It's a challenge enough to get the level of weed control where we're at right now, and there's many things working against us where we're really going to have to come up with some new solutions for weed management.
And those would be?
Well, it's probably not going to be a single thing that solves a problem real easily. You know, I know that there's a lot of growers that, you know, are kind of banking on having a new herbicide that comes out that like takes care of everything, but there's a lot of indicators that that's unlikely to be the case in the near future here.
And speaking of changing climatic conditions,
Yes.
finally I got that out.
Yes.
Now, we're not changing very much here, it sounds like.
We're actually not. We had a couple of fall days earlier on this week, but a lot of this forecast is going to be extremely warm, and it's going to be dry too. So I really think that the farmers are going to like this forecast a lot.
That's a farmer's forecast for the guys that are in the field right now.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Now, even though we are talking about still warm conditions, we have had some cool nights, so our soil temperatures have been going down a little bit as expected as we go now more and more into September. And our soil moisture, because of how dry it's been, they have been falling. But again, these are all good conditions of the fact that we expect there to be a nice dry next week or so. Now, the drought monitor still looks to be pretty good for a lot of the state of Illinois and also for Indiana too. It's obviously a little drier in the northern part of the state. But really, we had our one chance of rain for the past few days come through late Friday night into Saturday morning, and you may have had a little bit of delay this morning getting out into the fields, but for the most part, though, it's going to be dry after that. High pressure is in firm control here, and what it's actually going to do is keep any rain away here that we could see potentially by next week. You see this cold front approaching from the west, and that will actually kind of be locked over west of the Mississippi. So we might have some extra clouds that come in by later on in our forecast by the middle to end of next week, but the high pressure in place as of right now should be holding strong and should keep those rain chances away. So we are still looking to be very dry with temperatures in the 70s and 80s for a lot of the week. Our 8 to 14 day outlook, which goes into the first full week of October, definitely looking to be trending warmer than normal there with drier than normal conditions. And then going for the rest of October with our month-long forecast, you'll see that our 30-day outlook is trending warmer than normal and also likely going to be about normal with our precipitation. So we might catch back up a little bit later on in October with some rain, but as of right now, Stu, we've got this week and probably next week too, with many, many days that they can just keep on going.
And they're going hard and fast, I know.
Yes.
And so what that means is that guys who are in the field going that way, they need to keep hydrated.
Yes.
They need to take a rest once in a while.
Sleep is good.
Sleep is good, but they're going to want to be in the combine cab as much as possible.
Yep, and they might be doing it at night too, so we have to make sure the drivers are also aware of the big machinery that they've got too.
That's right. And we got flashing lights everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
So be aware of those.
Absolutely.
Jack, thank you,
You're
sir.
welcome.
Thank you for a great forecast. Well, it's the something coming up that we have is a driver training like you have never seen before. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
Most farmers will have commercial applicators spray their fields with pesticides or crop nutrients. But where beginning applicators learn how to do that? Well, Kevin Johnson, president of the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, has solved that problem with an elaborate training program.
This is quite the facility we have here at Bloomington on the west side of Bloomington. We have a professional applicator class. It's a 3.5-day class that IFCA and the ASMARC Institute put on. This is a beginner's class right here, but then we have a more professional class. But we have 3 days that we do in-class training, but we get them out of the seats and actually we do some training actually in the cab. We got 5 different pieces of equipment, all different colors that anybody can pick from, but everybody gets to get on every piece of equipment. But we got a track behind us, and we have a scenario where they cross a railroad track. More of an incline, a high line pole, and just kind of put the booms out and see where they're actually at in the tight quarters.
It gives a good idea of what they're going to face when they get out in the real world.
Exactly right. It is very much real world. And that's what we had, like I said, with all those different scenarios, that's what a farmer or a retailer is going to have or applicator is going to have when they get out there in tight corners. And when we get in the classroom, we actually talk about how do you properly spray a field when you're up against suburbia, stuff like that, and just kind of talk about tips. Everything we cover in this 3.5-day class.
Entry-level driver training for commercial applicators is intended for students with little or no background in commercial application of fertilizers and pesticides. AGCO and the ASMARC Institute developed the course specifically for new applicators with up to 3 years experience. And 10 acres serve as the proving grounds for this state-of-the-art facility just on the west side of Bloomington. A mile of all-weather track has been strategically designed to provide the most realistic, hands-on driving experience possible. More than $1 million in equipment is used to facilitate the unique learning process, not including the application equipment. The training prepares commercial applicators to meet mandates of a federal law that'll take effect next February.
Well, Total Grain Marketing, the grain division of Illini FS, South Central FS, and Wabash Valley Service Company, is the new owner of the Anderson's Grain Terminal at Champaign, the largest elevator of its kind in Illinois. Matt Lurkins, head of the Growmark Grain Division, said the facility offers advantages to their customers.
Well, we've had interest in that facility for quite some time. It's been one that's in our core territory that we drive by a lot, being that it's in Champaign. We're based here out of Bloomington, Growmark is. So that's been one that we've been talking to the Andersons with for several years, just letting them know that we were interested if they were ever wanting to go a different direction with that facility. And the timing was right this over the summer, and so we were able to put a deal together. It does provide to Total Grain Marketing, it provides another rail market to them. We were already on several Class 1 railroads, but it provides another one. It gives them an NS market that we didn't have before. So that was one of the main advantages to this facility for TGM, is to give us another rail outlet to make our grain more valuable. That primarily feeds down into the southeast, the feeder markets down there, and the poultry and the pork markets in the southeast. TGM handled just under 100 million bushels this past year that we just finished on August 31. This will have 12 million of upright storage, 16 if you count the ground pile there at Champaign. And so it's going to be a significant increase of 16% if we just fill it, which we think we'll probably get a little bit more than just the capacity there. So we think this will be a significant increase to TGM's handle on an annual basis. Primarily, it will be a farmer distribution point, so we'll be taking delivery from farmer. It'll be a first handling opportunity for TGM. We will do some feeding from other facilities of TGM, but primarily we're looking to be the first handler of farmer grain there at Champaign. The purchase price is something we got to keep confidential between us and the Andersons, so I can't speak on that. But we took possession on Friday, and we've been working hard to get all the conversion, all the back office stuff done this past weekend, and we think it's been a pretty smooth transition. But we do ask for a little bit of grace if there's some hiccups in the road as we get all the transfers done from the Andersons to Total Grain Marketing.
Can soil talk to satellites? Well, we'll find out in a little bit. But what we want to do right now is talk to Chip Nellinger. Hi, Chip.
Hey, how's it going?
Terrific, terrific. You look like you're ready to wrap up a week of markets.
It has been a very interesting week. We had a lot of outside market volatility this week with the Evergrande issue that the big real estate firm in China looking like they're going to default on some interest payments. That sent some ripples through the currency markets and financial markets, and spilled over and saw some considerable weakness earlier in the week on our corn and bean markets. But we bounced back nicely into the end of the week. Pretty decent close up near at least well off the week's lows, even with a big harvest weekend ahead of us with clear weather. We're able to close in decent levels here. The big emphasis next week is going to be that quarterly stocks report from the USDA on Thursday morning at 11 Central, and that could be a big market mover when that comes out.
It could, because we could be running on fumes when the end of the last marketing year ended.
Yeah, it feels like in the Eastern Corn Belt especially, some processor markets in Eastern Illinois and Central Indiana, we're paying from $1.10 to $1.60 over here just within the last couple of weeks. Even with harvest starting here over the last week or so, 10 days, that basis level is still pretty historically strong for old crop corn. So at least in the Eastern Corn Belt, it does feel like maybe we were kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, like you mentioned, and for all intents and purposes, maybe out of corn and even beans. So this is going to be a very interesting report come Thursday. It gives us our final old crop carryout figure. and that's important in the construction of the new crop balance sheet as well.
And we've only got a couple seconds left, but really, Eastern Corn Belt was out of corn. The Western Corn Belt's going to be starting the new marketing year out of corn. So
yeah, absolutely, and that's going to be part of the issue is how do we transition into that? You know, harvest results are still ongoing, and there's a little bit of confusion and concern on that wide variance of harvest results right now. So it really is just another piece of the puzzle with this report next Thursday that kind of gets us a little bit closer to the end result of what's our carryout going to be for new crop.
Chip, we really appreciate the conversation. Thank you, sir. We'll see you,
Thanks.
see you again. Chip Nellinger of Blue Reef Marketing. Well, coming up, we've got some interesting conversation between soil and satellites. Various companies and carbon programs have really all registered farmers into commitments to change farming practices so the companies become more carbon neutral. But how does one really confirm that soil carbon has increased? College of ACES researcher Caillou Guan is linking soil and its measurements to satellite data that can achieve that measurement.
We use a variety of ways to measure carbon, and then we started with digging soil cores, soil samples. That's the ones that we use as a benchmark. We also use so-called eddy covariance flux towers run by my colleagues, Dr. Karbanaki, who use the eddy covariance technology, essentially a tower in the middle of a field to measure all the carbon at a landscape, for example, a field. And then for a lot of the work that my lab is doing, we use remote sensing data with models, process-based models, to integrate the information that I just mentioned, you know, from soil samples, from eddy covariance, and then integrate that to the satellite with the models to go from above ground to below ground to measure holistically of the carbon budget.
But where does that intersect with a farmer?
Management practices that can particularly change carbon. And then, for example, we are talking about cover crop. And then this is one of the practice that potentially can take more CO2 from the atmosphere to the ground through growing cover crops through its photosynthesis. And then cover crop is not harvested, it's terminated, and the residual left on the ground. And in the long run, some part of the carbon will become the soil organic carbon. And then so that's one way of increase the soil organic carbon in the long run.
The key to success is satellite data.
We can see a lot of that from the satellite. I wouldn't, one thing that I want to clarify is not everything, but we see a lot. For example, we know whether there's availability of cover crop from the satellite. We also able to know that how much photosynthesis that cover crop can take from the atmosphere to the ground. And then we also, then this type of information will be very valuable. We will take them into our mathematical models to integrate below ground, which satellite does not see. So you essentially integrating what you can see from satellite data with mathematical models to info what you cannot see, which is below ground soil carbon. And then this holistic kind of I would say tool or innovation is what we have been developed in the most recent DOE Smart Farm project.
Caillou Guan, he thinks way above a lot of us. We'll be right back with a look at Shop Talk. Well, strip tilling, slowly growing in popularity despite a big learning curve. Someone who's been there, done that, is Jason Webster. He's director of the Precision Plantings Experimental Farm at Pontiac.
So we use strip till for our main primary tillage. So as a farmer, I'm creating compaction in the field for my tractors, my combines, my auger carts. I'm creating compaction like every farmer. I need to have that strip till come in with a shank, and we lift and fracture and we remove that compaction so we're not limiting, root size and things like that. We want to make sure our roots don't have that compaction to get down to water and nutrients. So I'm using a mole knife, deep shank. We go 10 by 10. We'd say 10 inches deep to get the lift and fracture, and I want to make a strip 10 inches wide. and that'll generally do a nice job for us in the fall. What we've learned is I can't do that in the spring because generally we're too wet underneath. And what'll happen is if we run a mold knife in wet conditions too deep, we'll end up with an air pocket the size of a softball behind that shank. And so that's when we have to switch if we're going to go to spring applications and maybe go to like a vertical till or a coulter type strip versus a deep mold knife.
Something else he learned is the benefit of banding fertilizer with that strip tillage.
Well, I think one of the things that didn't work is what the status quo has been for 20 years. I mean, I grew up with, watching my dad and grandfather broadcast fertilizer. We're broadcasting every square inch of the soil, and the problem with that has been it's not real efficient. It's not next to the root of a plant, whether it's a corn plant, soybean plant, what have you. So we've gone to strip tilling, and along with the strip tilling, banding the dry fertilizer or the liquid fertilizer, making sure that fertilizer is close to that root system of the plant. And we're seeing tremendous efficiencies. Corn, for example, last year, we're picking up over 17 bushel to the acre by that banding versus a broadcast. And, there's some cost to the banding that we have, but we factor in the economics. That's over $52 of a net gain per acre by implementing that type of technology.
Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. Before we end, though, we want to congratulate Illini FS and South Central FS and Wabash Valley for their decision to purchase the Andersons here at Champaign. We hope you have benefited from some of the information you heard and that you saw today, and hope that you would share it with your farming colleagues and tell them that we'll be back at this time next week. On behalf of Midwest Ag This Week team, we invite you to join us again next week at this time. I'm Stu Ellis, reminding you to be safe in the cab while you're doing chores and always around grain bins. After all, Farm Safety Week should be every week.